So I am going to tell you about the dog bones found in the second ship of Salme. Why the second ship? Because there were no dog bones in the first ship. So this is a simple reason. Usually in Viking burials, dogs are included as well, but for some reason they were not present in the first ship. But there have been other cases like that. A few words by way of a general overview about the bones of animals found altogether. I have three groups of them. First, the ones that were directly in the area in human skeletons that were not messed up. Then the second group, where we had relatively few bones. This was really on the bottom of the ship, on the planks. Most of them came out. I'm going to show you on the next slide this. And then it is the upper layers, mixed layers, roads, trenches, whatnot, bomb holes, etc. And we had a lot of material from them. When we look at the species, then we have bovine animals, dogs, cats, sorry, not cats. We have sheep, goats, some rodents, birds, brown bear. Then we had also some bones of fishes as well. And I'd like to mention specifically about the bear. It is about, it is probably something that came with the skin of the bear, and then we also had some teeth, but we did not. But this is included in among the archaeological material. So where were the dogs? First of all, the best preserved was the bones of the dog one. Yuri already showed her, because there was a tail of the dog as well. It was pretty much intact. Dog 2 was a little bit further off towards the south. And of the other second dog, we only had at its original place some mandible, and this was where the bomb hole was, because the surface had been moved there, so I cannot be quite sure if this dog was on the original place, in the original place. The third dog, again, so this was the road that led to the schoolhouse, where Yuri mentioned that the concrete was dug through with a shovel and some spades as well, actually. So there were two human bones, only tibia and feet. And then of the third dog in situ, we have again the tibia and the metatarsa. But then there were also bones of another dog. We called this dog number 4. But not a single one of them had been staying there on the spot. They were all messed up. And from the cable trench, we found bones of another dog, both the mandible and maxilla, and we called this the dog number 5. And then there is also dog. And the problem with this dog was that it was a bigger dog, and his bones came out in 2012. The earlier ones came out in 2010, and we couldn't find the bones of dog 6. But we also dated this dog just in case, this number 6, to be sure that the date is the same or the time is the same. And I do not remember exactly the year, timing. Then we can take a closer look at the first dog and its position with respect to the human bones. Here we have this was before the time of drones, so we've taken a photo from a forklift, and the forklift helped us quite well, and the braver ones climbed up there and were able to take photos. But here you can see the back part, the hip bones, and the other bones of the first dog, and we had to remove them. The main reason was that they were located in dry sand, and they were just going to fall to pieces. So in order for us to get them, we just had to pick them up from there. But here you can see the backbone of this dog, the head of the dog, the teeth and the mouth should be seen here, and they are underneath the elbow bone of this man, and the mandibula of the second dog are over there. Now this is a more precise picture of this, and the question was, how can you bury this dog so that the tail was up on an upper part? But sadly, you cannot see this from this picture either. So this is the first dog and the first person. So and it's a little bit lower than the bones of the tail, and here we can see bones R and N, and they were already in the bottom, practically in the bottom of the ship. And the dog itself, Marika had the question how it was possible that the tail was higher. So why wasn't the dog buried as last? But the planks are slanted, and the tail part is upper here, and the head part is down here against the planks of the boat. But given that the planks are slanted, then it is possible to place the dog like that there. I do not rule out the possibility that the dog was placed there at one point. And theoretically, it is also possible that the dog was placed there later, slightly later than the bones here. Well, you can always lift up the hand of the dead body and position it like that. But you couldn't do this definitely when the human body was placed there, not after that, because the difference of heights does not make it possible. And you couldn't definitely bury the dog considerably later, because these bones here, they were in the accurate position, so that the skeleton has been there in situ. So, because if the body had already been decomposing, then the bones would have been in a different position altogether. Then we can see also the swords that Yuri is going to tell you about tomorrow. And in the bottom here, there were some kind of arrowheads as well. Here's a little bit more about the first dog. And the backbone of the first dog had been cut through from here, behind the chest. You cannot see this so well, but it is better here. You can clearly see how this was done. The backbone comes, the head is down here, then you got the ribs and the skeleton, the last ribs and the vertebra. And here you can clearly see that this part, this bone has been shifted. And there is also a chopping mark there. I can show you this. So the skeleton of the first dog had not been preserved in an equal way. Some parts were better preserved, others not so well. So the The hind legs were well preserved all through the whole body, the bones of the hind legs. Also, the vertebra had preserved quite well, except for the ones around the neck. But this part was pretty much normal. When it comes to the ribs, then since the dog was lying on the right-hand side, so those ribs against the planks had been preserved better. We could see the left-hand side as well, but they were not so properly prepared. When it comes to the parts of the elbows and the neck, then they are not so well prepared, and the skull preserved rather. The skull, when we were excavating, we could still see the mandible and maxilla, but they were connected to the surface, to the soil, and they broke to pieces right away. So we could only keep the teeth. The front legs were better preserved. The parts that were in sand were better preserved, but towards the bottom of the ship, the soil was not so good, and that is why they had not preserved so well. The elbow was of the human body was well preserved there, but again, the parts towards the bottom of the boat or the ship, they had deteriorated more because of the acid environment in the bottom of the ship. Here we have the second and the fifth dog once again, more specifically in more detail. Here we have the third and fourth dog and how their legs were positioned. And here we had the tibia and also the bones of the feet. And the dog was in such an interesting position. I'd never seen anything like that. That the back, the hind legs are parallel. It seems like the dog was buried on the back. It was really a surrealist picture, where the legs tied together, or why they were in such a position, we will never know. I read somewhere in the literature that there was a similar case somewhere in the Netherlands. And there's also a piece of the mandible or maxilla. I think that it could be belong to the third dog, but I cannot be too sure, because there were all sorts of other pieces of skull and other bones, so these bones were found all across this area. And there were also many gaming pieces in the same area. So whether these belong to the third or fourth dog, I'm not able to say. This must have been a young dog, maybe 18 months, 2 years, more close to 2 years old. And the fourth dog was definitely older than 6 years. And they are quite similar, these two dogs, because we had these bones were just entirely identical, so you couldn't make out which was whose. Yeah, this is not such a good picture. But sadly, you cannot see what I was trying to show you here, because the fragments of the skull were around here, and this was the distance where the bones of the two dogs were spread out. Here's more about the third dog and its bones, and also you can see some of the gaming pieces here. And again, here you can see the tibia, how they were very close together, even bent inserted towards each other. Now we come to the chopping marks. This is one of the photos about the first dog and its backbone and the ribs, where you can see the chopping marks. And the first dog also had a chopping mark on the thigh bone. Here's also a detailed photo of that. You can see the chopping mark here. So why this was done? The bone was cut not entirely, and it has probably broken afterwards, after burial, possibly. So why such a cutting mark there is? Probably with a sword, I cannot say. And then there was also tiny pathological change. You can't see it on the other bone. There was a place where the ossified muscles had attached to. Then the front left leg had one toe cut off, and these are just tiny things. They are not so photogenic, so to say. Then this is probably the second or the fifth dog, we cannot be sure. This is a piece of the elbow bone. And again, this is part of the arm bones. Again, there is a chopping mark cut from front to back. And this one here is probably the fourth or third dog, and this is better preserved elbow bone, and there is a knife mark, I would assume. I don't think that you can use or create something like that by using the tip of the sword. For example, if the dog was attacking a person and someone just pointed the sword to the dog. But I cannot see a reason why it should be used like that. So I cannot interpret this cut here. Why? Under what circumstances this cut has appeared, but this is where it is and what it is. More about chopping. The bones there were also ribs that had chopping marks. So it seems to me that the custom was to cut the backbone. The first dog's collarbones or neck bones have not been properly preserved, so it's not possible for me to say what had been done to it. So here we have the tibia and fibula of the first dog, and normally the dog have separately the tibia and fibula, but on the left back hind leg, these two bones have been merged together. And I had an X-ray made of it as well to see whether there is a kind of injury there or changes there, but nothing was found. But this is a relatively usual phenomenon in the case of dogs. Sometimes it's to do with injuries, sometimes there are other circumstances that these bones have been growing together. There is a tiny membrane in between, and that ossifies and then grows together. But this is not something that hinders the dog too much, such a development. But the most interesting pathology that we found was this in the third dog. It was the mandibula of the third dog. And so what's interesting here? The interesting thing is the tooth here. It's a cone-shaped tooth. I have more pictures later, but you can, in principle, they should look pretty much like this. But it has this cone-shaped maxilla. It has a molar, sorry. And premolars have been joined together, and it came out after certain research that there could be an X-linked hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia. It's a very complicated thing. It is also something that humans have similar teeth, conic teeth, and even mice do have this kind of a dysplasia. So what could also happen to such dogs? They could have no hair at parts of their body, and since it's X-linked, then it is more present in male dogs. They might have no hair whatsoever. So it could have been a slightly special and very valuable animal because of being special. So this is not what the Mexican and Peruvian hairless dogs have. This is a recessive, not a dominant indicator or feature. Here we have one toe of the third dog. The fracture has been badly healing here. Could be a punch mark or something. And here we have the mandibula and maxilla of all the dogs. So we always ask, what could these dogs have looked like? Sadly, we do not have their skulls, and it is very difficult to say if you only have such material. The third dog, it is relatively has a relatively long and elegant nose and mouth, and could be maybe some kind of a hunting dog, and it is difficult. I don't think that I've got the scale right here. The first dog is relatively, the bones of the first dog here are relatively big, but the rest of the body wasn't so big, judging by the bones. And then the fourth dog is the eldest of them, could be more than 6 years old, because this tooth has been already wearing off, and it's also been broken as well. So so it must have been painful as well. The first dog is about, judging by the teeth, it was difficult but judging by the hips, we could say that was between 2 to 6 years. And the second and the fifth dog, one of them has to be relatively young. And I would rather think it's the fifth dog that is relatively younger. And the second one is also relatively young because the teeth are in pretty good shape. When we look at the wither height, we were able to judge this on the basis of the bones that had properly preserved the tibia and fibula. and the bones of the foot. So judging by the measurements of the different bones, we came to the conclusion that the height at the withers for the first dog could be something between 66 to 69 centimeters. The third dog maybe pretty much the same height. And the sixth dog, so this one was really big, judging by its fully preserved tibia and fibula. So he seems to be slightly taller. We also tried to calculate body mass, but for some reason we didn't get good results here. Maybe the reason is that the material was not properly preserved, or that I could not follow the methodology properly, or maybe there were other problems. So using the different bones and their proportions, it turned out that the minimums and maximum masses have such a big difference. And I can see I still have 3 minutes left. For some reason, these differences are really big. Can we trust the averages? Judging by the wither height, then we might believe the average body mass or masses. And when we, and judging by the mandibular and maxillas, the picture wasn't any better. Again, the differences in body mass were really large, 10 kilograms, especially this one is quite odd. So I cannot say why these methods did not work, given the data that we have. We should probably just pick just one indicator and use that, and you end up with this one set of data. And this was all. I'm sure you've seen already this photo.
Aitäh.
Thank you. Are there any questions at present? I would like to ask you, Marika, your question about the dog and its tail. Did you get an answer now? Marika, what is it that you do not understand? So what is it that you do not understand? Let's discuss this. So my question was, because I hadn't seen the pictures. I wasn't. You tried to convince me that the dog was buried at the same time. But according to the photo, the bones have not even preserved. But not all the dogs have been preserved in this. But you cannot prove this. Given that we are also interpreting, then please speak one at a time. Please speak one at a time. One finishes and then the other one takes a breath and speaks, so people will understand who is saying what. Well, given that this dog was, its body was, the backside was on the shield and the tail was hanging over it. It came down from here, and if this tail part had been outside of this burial for a longer time, this part must have been covered up immediately, because otherwise the animals would have eaten it up, or birds. If you want to say that someone else was added there or buried there, then they had to remove some of the sand in between. So do I Do I understand it correctly that the dog was on the planks side of the ship? Yes, the dog was on the side of the ship that was slanting, and also the legs of one of the human body were there as well, and the dog's rib cage was against the legs of this human body. I'm not saying that the dog had to be buried there separately. It was probably buried together with the other bodies. But how do you prove that all the 32 burials are of the same time? Well, what is clear is that the tail part of the dog and the end part of the dog must have been covered immediately after the burial. You agree with me in this? You have seen what happens to a dead seagull when it's left out there. Someone is going to come and eat it up. And it's the same with the dog. And it is quite natural. This does not rule out the possibility, theoretically, that somewhere diagonally across the ship something might have been later. I think this is going to be very complicated and long discussion, but there are other possibilities and interpretation, and the dog was covered up, but I can see a threat here that all the burials were at the same time. This was also said in the Estonian media at the same before the excavations. So I do not know. Maybe you're right, but I cannot see proof. I cannot see proof. Truly. Well, you cannot reconvince me. And another comment from Raili Alme. A question to Lina. I saw that the dogs were really large. When we are looking at modern dogs, what types they could have been? They are relatively large. Yeah. Some say they decide very bravely or with certainty that the breeds that this was this and this was the other breed, but I'm not convinced based on just the measurements. In order to be able to say this, I should have precise measurements of modern-day dogs of the same breed. But we didn't even have the possibility to measure the whole length of the body. So I'm not convinced about the statements about the different breeds that were available. You mentioned that the first dog had these very big teeth. Wasn't it that? Yes, it was. So what are the breeds that normally have relatively big teeth? Yeah, we can continue this discussion later. Well, broadly speaking, proportionally, the smaller the dog, the bigger the teeth. Well, I haven't gone through the whole material. I'm sure there's literature about the measurements of the teeth and things. But they couldn't have been of any specific breed, because breeds were not available, were not around then. Well, they must have been 60, 70 centimeters. You have a Doberman dog of this, the German Shepherd is of this height. These are all the female doggy, or the Great Dane is more than 70 centimeters. So we should to know more of the proportions of the bodies as well. But generally, they think that they are probably of Spitz type. If we had the skulls as well, then we could have used craniometry. Yes, the first one had large jaw bones, but the legs were were nothing special. Are there any other questions?
Apologies if I missed the inference. When you say there's a sword cut or a cut to the spine, is that a killing blow or is that a disabling blow?
Yes, I think that it is a killing blow.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have had to finish it off in a further point.
et ma olen olnud meremees.
I've been a sailor myself, sailing on the Atlantic. So I know what a favor it is, a dog on the ship. But what were the functions of the dogs in Viking ships? They could have been hunting dogs, guard dogs. I do not know about food. They were probably also catching rodents, like tends to happen on ships. But they were also a luxury thing, just like the hawks or falcons. Nobody knows why this group ended up in Salme and why they brought such stuff, dogs and falcons and things. So I cannot say.
Nii. Aga siis...
Well, great thanks to Lina and Marge and Alari, and they are also going to receive the board game as a gift.